Okay, great. All right, so for today, let's start to dive through the multitude of ways that we essentially can create or use color and define a color scheme within our flow. So for this example, I'm just going to use our library. So I'll pick from the global life expectancy data set. And so from this, let me just go ahead and make it really simple here. And what I'll do is use categorize columns, and I'm just going to select the different continents. So we have our 5 different continents. That's if I increase the number of points per column, we'll spread them out a little bit more. And right now, each of them is just by default green. So this green color is by default what will arise. And so from here, you have the ability to choose color scheme. And so color scheme allows you to assign a color to a categorical variable, or basically any variable that has different categories amongst it. And so for this, if I select continent, you'll see that now each continent has a different color. So the other things that we can start to do here is, as opposed to just looking at the continents, we could also look at the country. And so within each continent group here, you'll notice that there's different countries, and that within this, you can actually sort it further with this button called sorted. And so within sorted, you can do basically subsorts within the column itself to sort by something else. So if I sorted by year, or sorry, that's not that sorts. This is the sorting, sorry, left to right or middle out. Yes.
Michael, yes, I'm wondering, can you do a full screen share? Because I've got you. Well, I guess I can put you in focus mode. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, let me do that actually on this side. I'll just pin myself so you guys are all
I'll do it.
forced to watch me.
That's it. That's what I needed. Thanks.
There we go. Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, good point there. Okay, so we defined somewhat of a color scheme here, but the ability to actually define something more custom is what we're going to talk through today. So let me change this back so that it's per continent, and just quickly go to the very basic area where we recommend. So one area to go is in the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. If you click on environments, you'll then have some options here, and amongst them is this area called custom color scheme. And so within this, you can create a new color scheme by naming it anything you like. For right now, you just have the ability to define one custom color scheme that will exist for all steps. I think in the future, we'll have multiple color schemes, as well as the ability to directly attach a color to a categorical variable. I'll go through exactly how that works right now, but I'll just call this custom color 1. And so as I go ahead and add more colors into this, basically every time I click this plus button, it's just going to add a color into the custom color scheme. And so if I go back to the swarm definition itself, on this, I can define how those colors, or basically tell it to use that color scheme. So in color scheme, I'm going to use, instead of scheme defaults, I could select from any of these that are sort of predefined color schemes that we have, that you can select the very last one, which is the custom color one that I just defined. And so by selecting that, when I go back into environment, you'll notice that if I start to change these around, it will change the order. And so the question will arise here is, how are these ordered? So you'll notice here that it's going white, yellow, green, purple, blue. And if I switch these around, it will also switch in terms of which country it's covering. But why is it doing that, right? And why is that? Because this is not alphabetical order, right? It's not Asia, Americas, Oceania, Europe, Africa. It's actually based on the order in which the rows appear in the data set. So that's sort of an important distinction to note when setting the custom colors for right now, that because we don't have the ability to assign the color directly to a categorical variable, at least not yet, that it basically goes based on the order in which it shows up in the spreadsheet. And so if I were to look at the spreadsheet itself, what you'll see here is that it goes in an order and the order is based on this continent. So it's going Asia, and then Oceania. Oh, I guess the Americas must be in there somewhere, but it's essentially it's based on the order in which it shows up in this document up here. And so it's by row order that it will then look. So it's going Asia, and then it goes to Americas here. You see that? Yeah. Asia, and then Americas, and then it goes to Oceania. And so that's basically how it's being sorted. So if I were to sort this a different way, and I could do that actually within this data source tab by clicking on continents, and you can sort by other things too, but let me sort it opposite direction now. So it's going Oceania first. And I'm going to go ahead and create a snapshot, which is basically a way to take a snapshot of whatever filters or other things I did to this AG grid setup. That from this, now when I go in to change the colors, if I change this to snapshot 1, we will see the order change as well as the colors associated with those change. So now we see Oceania first, then Europe, then Asia, the Americas, Africa. So it's just by simply adding that snapshot that I was able to reorder the data to associate it with the color scheme in a different way. So just to show that it's a different way, I could reorder these so it's the opposite. So Africa is in front, and then the colors will be still the same: white, yellow, green, blue, purple. And so if I go in here and change snapshot 1 so that continents, it's ordered the opposite direction, and update that snapshot. Now I see Africa in the beginning, I was white, then Americas, then Asia, then Europe, then Oceania. So the colors are staying in the same position, and it is the categorical columns that are really shifting here. So let me pause there. I see 2 hands up from Stephen and Thomas. So let me answer those before I jump any further.
Hey, Thomas.
Sorry, that was a leftover hand. I am now lowering my hand.
Okay.
2 quick questions, Michael. First is, when you're choosing those colors for a custom, what do you color scheme? Is that the terminology?
Yes.
Okay. When you're creating a custom color scheme, can you set hex color codes? I might have missed that.
Oh, yeah, good question. So within the custom color scheme, you can. So it's within environments. Each one of these colors you can click into. And when you click into it, you have the ability to essentially define the RGB values, and you see this little icon here, you can change it to the HSL or the hex code directly.
Perfect.
One thing that's quite nice is actually just this eyedropper comes in handy quite a lot. And I'd say where it actually comes in handy the most right now is actually with text objects. So one thing that you'll notice is like automated legends is still something that is coming. And we're actually pretty excited about that release, because we're basically releasing this whole section called variables, which is a whole new section that allows you to do really, really powerful things within the flow editor, including interactive legends, where you click on the legends and it will highlight everything on the other swarm or swarms that are associated to it. Lots of really interesting things you can start to do there. But until then, the thing we recommend for legends is to use text objects. So for this example, if I were to just want to have a quick legend that references these colors, what I would typically do is create a text object, put it in the very center by clicking this button to put it 000. And then I'm just going to start naming it. So I'll say Africa first. And the color that I want associated with that is right here. And I'll click that color and click the eyedropper, and then just select the associated color that I want with it. Then what I can do is duplicate that text object and then name this next one Americas, and then change the color by clicking the eyedropper tool and going in and selecting that. And so this is sort of a very straightforward way to just quickly put a color legend together until we have a little bit more capability that will basically allow you to create these in a more automated fashion, as well as a helpful workaround, interactive.
Yeah, that's helpful. The other question I had, Michael, is Can you go back to not the color, but the I think the swarm where you chose the category and you chose continent? Yeah, okay. So if you change any other column, all of those like bars will change based on what the column represents, right? So if you went to region, it would, instead of African Americas, it would be Asia. And yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, so if I do
Got it.
region, the color is still being defined by the attributes that I associated to it. So in the swarm definition, the color is still being defined by the continent. So that will not change. And so I could put anything here that I want, and the color can be separate. So it's actually a pretty powerful function in that sense, where you could, in this sense, you're seeing the continents as the color and then the region as the separate identifier here. So it's sort of breaking it out more refined, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that's helpful. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Great question. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So we've covered now basically the ability to add color scheme in directly in the flow editor, clicking on the environment tab and basically adding colors and finding the mix that you like, that you have the ability to edit the color directly here, including entering the hex code. But I'd like to show you a different way of entering this data as well. And that is to actually use, to put it in directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a, excuse me, a blank Google Sheets. I'm just going to name this colors. So, okay, so these are the categories. I'll just do X, Y, some numbers. And then I'm going to name something called color. So what is a useful thing to do is if you want to be more specific with the colors and you want to be very specific and defined with what they are, you can define them within the spreadsheet itself. So this is really helpful if you have multiple swarms, all of which you want to have the same color scheme, but might not be sorted by the same categorical variable. And so to do that, it's a matter of just entering in the hex value directly. The easiest way to get a hex code directly is just search for a color. And if you do like red hex, basically Google, as well as many others, will give you HTML codes for colors. And so this hex code with the hashtag in the front, as well as this RGB, is basically the thing you're going to be defining. And so I'm just going to pick here. There's actually quite a few color schemes. And after this course, I think we'll, in our help section, we do have a few sections on color and where you can find good color schemes and things to check for color blindness and other things like that are really helpful. But I'm just going to put in some sort of random ones here of hexadecimal color codes, which basically associate to a color directly. And I'm just going to basically copy paste a few of these guys in to create my color scheme. And obviously I'd do a lot more if I were to pick, to really try to pick one that's more meaningful. But for now, I'm just going to sort of pick these random ones. So now I've basically defined these color codes. And just so you can see one other way to do that, you can also type them without the hashtag and instead put 0x and then the hexadecimal number, in this case, 702.963. And so basically that 0x acts as another identifier for the hexadecimal code that it actually converts the hashtag into the 0x in the back end. So it's actually just slightly faster to do it this way, but it's not meaningful enough to really warrants only doing it that way. So that should suffice. So let me just, last thing here. So let's see. Okay, so now we have these colors. I'm going to hit share. And copy this link. And so in this, let's go ahead and let's add a new step, and I'll make this a blank step. And I'm going to add a new swarm by clicking the plus icon next to swarm. And so from here, I'm going to add this new data set. So I'm going to select upload. Instead of loading a CSV file, I'm going to load from a Google spreadsheet. And so when I click that, then I can paste in my Google spreadsheet link, click on imports, and this will import that document directly. And so if I click on this edit, re-upload again, you'll see the data I just entered. So we got category, X, Y, color, and color 2. So that's the spreadsheet we just defined. And so in case you haven't seen this integration before, I actually really like using Google Sheets and Flow together. They work quite nicely, like peas and carrots. And part of that reason is that if you just make a quick update here, so if I change these to Exposition 2 instead of 1, instead of needing to resave a CSV, then re-upload that CSV into Flow, all I need to do is just hit refresh. And when I hit refresh, that will refresh the data set, and now it's updated. So it makes the iteration loop really fast if you want to make changes on the fly, as opposed to needing to make more in-depth or saving the CSV, uploading the CSV, and all of that. So any questions on what I've gone through so far right here? I just want to make sure to give a quick pause before I jump forward. Yep. Stephen, do you have a question?
Just real quick, is there a way to auto refresh, or do you have to manually click it to refresh?
You have to manually click the refresh button.
Okay.
Yep, you have to manually click it for now. There are some flows that we've done for more custom engagements that do refresh upon load, which I think is what you're describing, where at the time you go into the flow, it loads the latest data sets, or if it's from a data stream, that it pulls the latest sets in. And so we can configure that, but in the flow editor today, how it exists here, we have to click the refresh button. And part of that is to save your own butt so that you don't accidentally change something on the original sheet, and then that impacts everything you've created henceforth. So yeah, that's sort of a part of it as well.
Thank you.
And different online doc editors, 360, Nextcloud documents. So yeah, so the other types of documents that you can handle, basically any, basically anything that can export as a CSV, which is basically every type of, Excel, OpenOffice, Python. I could keep going, but basically we sort of have tried to make it as universally acceptable as possible, which is basically through a CSV, which is a comma separated value document. Google Sheets is the next, and then you'll see that we have live queries here. This is not in production yet. This is still in our staging server, but the ability to query live data sets and actually link to your live databases as opposed to needing to load it manually is actually very, very near in the future. And we have a few customers that are using that, but we're still doing quite a lot of testing before we push that through to production. But yeah, if you want to make just an Excel sheet, so on this, the same thing is that you want to export it as a CSV. So as opposed to saving this as a Excel file, which it by default will, basically you need to change this to a CSV file, which is the 5th one down here, CSV UTF-8. And then by saving it that way, you can load it in. So that's sort of the other way to handle loading data in, and should make it a lot easier for Office 360 and all sorts of other things. But that's sort of the means by that. Yep. Any other questions? Sure, I didn't miss one here.
For people who are, like, for example, super needful of Excel, would it work to put an Excel file on Google Drive and kind of keep it in Excel format, but edit it in Drive so that you get the benefit of the integration? Like it would just treat it as what amounts to a CSV source, but people who really feel compelled to stay in Excel could, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and I feel like I should have tried this already. And
I find their
I
edit a native
yeah
Excel file in Google Drive. It's really good.
yeah it's I can't say definitively if that works or not. I'm really curious now though, because if it does, that would be a huge help.
It beats like switching to Azure, I guess. I don't know, you know.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, no, that's definitely worth trying. So let's take that note. Let's definitely try that, and if it works, we'll let everyone know. And we will name it Thomas's shortcut.
well, I work in a very cheap place, right? And we're always trying to make the most of the tools we have, right? So
I love it.
anything that beats exporting and importing CSVs, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
I
error
agree.
prone, you know, and most mortals, you know what I mean? It's just a lot to ask.
Yeah, no, agreed. I'm a big fan of the Google Sheets integration, and more integrations to come. So that you have to do less back and forth is definitely of interest. So the main thing to highlight here is basically we imported this data set, and so now we want to define the colors based on that hexadecimal value that we put into the data itself. And so that is done by clicking on colors and then going to by hex values in column. So that is the hexadecimal value that is in a column, and then I need to tell them what color to look for, in which case it is the color column, and this is that color column. And so now I've imported those values directly. And so that's a way to assign color directly based on the spreadsheet itself. And so, if I were to change this here, and I'll just change this to 1 and refresh the data set here. And I didn't really note which one it was or what color changed, but one of these color changed. And essentially that's the easy way to make these color updates or have it be very directly linked to a color. So that's a very powerful mechanic for color, but also a little more involved in that you have to add it to the actual data set itself, as opposed to just defining it in this color scheme area, which actually comes in handy quite often as an easier way to just apply a color scheme throughout your whole documents, because this one color scheme can apply to multiple swarms. That it's not just one swarm, but you could have multiple swarms that all associate to that color scheme just by clicking color scheme and defining the color scheme as the custom color scheme. So multiple ways to basically do the same thing, but I do think that the defining it by a hexadecimal value is extremely valuable to do. Now, the one other thing to note here, and I'm going to basically create another step here, is that we have within here fixed and gradient scale. So fixed is probably the most basic here, which is that you can select one color and that one color will be associated for all the dots. And where this really can come in handy, as an example, is when you have multiple swarms overlaid on top of each other. And I think one of those that is a good example of it is actually this IHME COVID data flow that I created back earlier this year. And the step I want to jump to is this one. So here I have in yellow all estimated infections, and I'm using basically this text estimated infections as a way to label it. I'm also highlighting January 1st as like that's the new one or the new level. And then we're building this out. Let me just skip ahead just a little bit here. So we're seeing the huge rise in cases from Omicron, but then the things I'm overlaying are hospitalizations. I'm introducing that as this orange layer, and then I'm also introducing deaths as this red layer. So each one of those colors is a fixed color that I've defined, and it's actually this flow is made up of 3 swarms overlaid on top of one another. So what you're seeing here is infections. Oh, that's just for the axis, sorry. Oh no, I'm getting it right. Yeah, so this first one is infections. So if I were to deselect this, you'll see that all of the yellow goes away. And so this is all being defined just by using a fixed color scheme and having it be yellow. And then what I've done is in hospitalizations, I've made that orange and I've moved it 0.05 meters to the right, like closer. So you'll see that it's moving it just a little bit away so that it's not right on top of it, which by default it would be, but instead just being a little bit in between. So 0.05 meters away basically spaces them out. And so this is kind of a nice, easy way, or it's I think kind of a nice way to basically be able to define each swarm separately and see them next to each other, as well as have them animate separately. So basically you're treating them as separate swarms, but by treating them as separate swarms, you actually have quite a lot of power to do, lots of things. I could bring it out, I could move it to the side. But the other nice thing is that because each swarm has its own on rollover, on select interaction characteristics. And what I mean by that, just to maybe explain that a little further, if I go into the swarm definition for hospitalizations, which is this orange line, the thing I have going here is underneath interactions. We have on select overlay text as well as on rollover pop-up text. And so it's the on rollover that I've sort of done something more unique with, where the yellow on rollover I have going up here, and then I have the orange on rollover for hospitalizations showing up down here. And what that enabled me to do is by putting the label just to the left of it or to the right of it, it's acting both as a legend as well as a way to basically navigate through and see the values as I sort of just put my mouse over top of it. And I think that's a pretty interesting mechanic to show both the legend as well as some additional information. And so the way that that was accomplished, just to quickly finish that out, is within the swarm definition. So if I open up the swarm for hospitalizations and I look down towards the bottom, there's something called pop-up text options. And essentially that's telling me what size the text is, do I connect it with a line, and then where is it? Now, by default, we show things dynamic so that when you roll over, it always puts it a certain distance away from the camera and it's going to show up there. So it's like right in your face. That works well for XR environments where you want the content to be a certain distance from the viewer's face. But in this case, I'm actually making it fixed. So it's in a fixed location for where it's showing up, and that's defined by these fixed location parameters. And so I can move this around to my heart's content to put it somewhere else. So that's just one mechanic that I think is I don't see used very often, but I think is actually quite powerful, and just using fixed. So as opposed to having this all be one swarm with 3 different lanes, essentially, I've instead created 3 swarms and then I'm handling them each independently. And that gives me a little more flexibility. So just another way to sort of, I guess, skin the cat or do this. And so let me pause there. Any questions on that? So that's fixed color. Okay. And so the last thing to cover, and maybe I'll just use this actually. So I'm going to save a copy and make sure not to mess up the original. So the next thing to cover is gradients, which allows you to go on a linear scale between one integer and another, or sorry, one, not integer only, but one number and another to define the, a gradient between. So to help bring this to life, this yellow that is part of infections, let's go ahead and change this. So we're going to change this to a gradient scale, and we're going to use what is on this y-axis, which is this multiplier from the January 2021 peak. And I'm not 100% sure which one it is, but we'll just, yes. So infection V1 maybe. And I'm going to go from, let's go from purple to orange. And what you'll see here is that at the very peak, you're seeing orange, and at the very base, you're seeing purple. And we can define this more clearly by clicking on the 3 dots here and going into the advanced UI. Now, within the advanced UI, am I blocking it? I might be blocking it, sorry. So in the advanced UI, you have a few more options here on the right-hand side. So now what you're seeing is a range minimum and maximum, and these are basically associated with the color itself. So one thing you could do is define like the actual minimum and maximum, which is what it's doing right now. So the orange is at the maximum and purple is at the minimum, and then it creates a gradient between those. Or I can almost set more of like a threshold. So let's say I want the threshold more to be like 1, and then 1.1 is the other. That's now what I've done is that instead of looking at it more as like a gradient, is actually more of like a either or, basically. Once it gets beyond that 0.1, that it goes to this orange value. And so you can make it a little more clear, the distinction between things. But the other way to do it is to keep it more of a gradient scale and make it more like 5 or something like that for this. You can start to play around with it to get to a gradient that works. Now, the one thing to note is that we don't have logarithmic color scales or bivariate color scales. That requires a little bit additional work. And just to show one example of that, because I think it's a very powerful mechanic, but something that has to be defined in the Google Sheets directly would be this one. So this was one that I built off of like a McKinsey article, but what I like about this is that it is a bivariate color scheme. So here on this x-axis, we have the number of people percentage fully vaccinated from white to this darker blue. And then on the y-axis, we have from white to red, the number of active cases. And so what this allows you to create is what's called a bivariate color scheme, where you're combining 2 attributes together as part of a color scheme. So this blue means high active cases and high percent fully vaccinated. And low means low, so basically each color means 2 things, not just one thing anymore. Can be a little confusing, but I do think it's a powerful mechanic. But basically this would need to be done in the spreadsheet directly. We can't handle this directly yet, but I'm just showing it because I do think it is a kind of a powerful mechanic to really overlay some more information. In this case, it was really looking at the impact of vaccines, and that you could really see where there's a lot of active cases, or this was a while back now, but you could basically see the areas that had a lot of cases did not have a lot of vaccines, basically, more or less. It's sort of went hand in hand, and those areas that were highly vaccinated saw less active cases per 100,000. So it was a really interesting case in point of being able to point to the impact of vaccines more directly, which I think was pretty interesting. So I'm not going to go too far into this one, but just to highlight that the colors, you can do quite a lot with colors in some other dimensions as well. So I think I've talked about pretty much almost every type of color we could possibly handle here. So we can do gradients, we can do the color scheme, we can just define a fixed color, or we can actually define the color in the data itself, which gives us sort of infinite possibilities for what we want to do with that color. So let me pause there. I think that's covered pretty much the whole span here, and make sure to answer what questions you have or anything else I can start to go into. So unpin myself. All right, so you guys have seen everything there is to know about color. And any questions or any other observations? Happy to dive into any other off questions or things you guys are encountering. I can sort of pause the recording here in a sec.